In 1627, the Ursuline Monastery in Loudun, France, received a new nun named Jeanne de Belcier. Jeanne was a very strange creature. She was short in stature, and her face was as beautiful as an angel, but her eyes spoke of evil. Despite the fact that she was expelled from her previous monastery because of her harsh language, but surprisingly, after moving to her new convent, Jean's behavior was changing. She became like an angel and helped her supervisor in all the daily work of the monastery. And in addition, she spent most of her time studying sacred and mystical books in the library. And in the field of religious issues, she would spend hours asking questions from the head of the monastery and seeking guidance from her. And soon she became an expert in the field of religious and mystical sciences. She was engaged in worship more than all the nuns, and everyone saw her praying and meditating at any hour of the day and night. In the same year, the head of the monastery was transferred to another place, and since she was so impressed by Jeanne, she decided to introduce Jeanne as her successor. And so unexpectedly, at the age of 25, the expelled nun became the head of the Ursuline convent in Loudun. But a few months later, very strange stories about Jeanne reached the Loudun nuns. Apparently, she had continuous nightmares, and in these nightmares, a priest named Urban Grandier would visit her and sexually assault her. And as time passed, the nightmares became more sexual and violent. And also, it was interesting that Jeanne had invited Grandier sometime before these nightmares and asked him to work as an Ursuline priest. And Grandier had respectfully rejected her offer. And for Loudun locals, he was known as a seductive man. And they said that he misleads young girls with well-behaved, and that made Jeanne's nightmares seem a little more real to everyone else than a normal nightmare. After a short time, several other nuns also announced that they had similar nightmares to Jeanne. And this issue caused the priest of the monastery, Canon Mignon, to worry about this issue one day. He decided to bring some exorcists to the convent to work on the nuns. And after this incident, almost all the nuns were talking about having nightmares with Grandier. And the story was clear for the exorcists. The nuns were possessed by demons that sent to them by Grandier. And to learn a lesson from people, Mignon decided to perform the exorcism ceremony in front of the people and in public. And when the show began, a large number of people gathered to watch the event. At the beginning of the ceremony, and when the work of the exorcist began, the nuns fell on the ground and rolled and screamed and shouted obscenities at the same time. But it seems that Jeanne was more possessed by demons than the other nuns. Now, it became clear to everyone that Grandier bewitched these nuns, and thus he was shortly afterwards arrested on the charge of witchcraft. Grandier was sentenced to death based on the available evidence, and after enduring many tortures in 1634, he was tied to a pillar and burned in front of a large crowd. And after this incident, the fever of all these events subsided quickly, and the demons quickly came out of all the nuns' bodies. Everyone except Jeanne, and it was as if the demons had not only thought of letting her go, but had gained more control over her, until the news of this noisy conquest reached to the Society of the Jesuits. And they decided to close the case and rid Jeanne of these demons forever. And after successive meetings with several members of the community, Jeanne seemed to be getting better. After some time, she engaged herself hard in meditation and distanced herself from any kind of manifestation, and she lived like a real hermit. And little by little, she claimed that she was not the only one who could win over the demons. Rather, she was able to approach the position of mysticism to such an extent that the Lord kissed her on the mouth, and then she became seriously ill with a deadly disease. But she got better at once and explained that an angel has come to her in her dream and poured a few drops of a healing oil on her body, and this is how she was healed. And after these stories, her name was spread everywhere, and everyone was talking about her amazing adventures. And that's how Jeanne decided to start a European tour to explain these miracles to everyone in her own language. On this tour, she met almost all the most prominent personalities of her era. Among the most important of them, we can mention the King and Queen of France. And after all these stories, she finally died in 1665. And this is how she became one of the famous characters at that time. But some years after her death, her autobiography, which she wrote herself, was found. In her manuscripts, she emphasized her purely dramatic dimension, and she said that she was constantly acting. And all the strange stories that had happened until that time were all lies. And according to herself, she had found some books related to exorcism, and she was able to exorcise the nuns of the monastery and make that exciting and scary story, to be able to gather all the attention and to get her thirst for adoration by acting out. Thank you for watching this video. And lastly, take care of the Jeannes in your own life.